The apartment next to mine has been sealed for 8 weeks. Mr. Redford, the man who lived there, passed away in his sleep. Heart failure, they said. I wasn't close to him, but he had a quiet routine. Always wore a sweater, even in summer. Every morning at exactly 6:47 a.m., he'd knock twice on my door and hand me the newspaper with a smile. He didn't speak much. That knock, though, 2 sharp taps, became as much a part of my morning as coffee. When he died, building management taped off the door and changed the locks. The hallway was quiet after that. No more footsteps, no more knocking, no more faint smell of burnt toast and coffee that used to leak through the shared wall between our kitchens. Until last week. I woke up early before my alarm to a smell I hadn't noticed in months. Coffee. Not just any coffee, his coffee. Bitter, overboiled, with a dusty undertone that clung to the air. I told myself it had to be someone downstairs, or maybe the air vents doing something strange. Smells travel in these old buildings. The next morning it happened again. But this time it wasn't just the smell. At 6:47 I heard the sound of a grinder, that familiar jagged whirring he used every morning. I froze in bed. The sound wasn't vague or muffled. It came from behind the wall that backs onto his empty kitchen. Then came the worst part. 2 knocks, not on his door, on mine. Not loud, just exactly the way he used to do it. I didn't open the door. I haven't told anyone. Not the landlord. Not my girlfriend. I kept telling myself it was some kind of echo. Maybe a new tenant moved in early and no one told me. But this morning I checked again. The tape is still across the door. The lock hasn't changed. The apartment is still sealed. And yet at 6:47 a.m., 2 knuckles tapped on my door. Tomorrow I'm going to stay up all night and watch the hallway. I need to know what's out there. I didn't sleep last night. I sat on the floor just inside my apartment door, a blanket draped over my shoulders, every light turned off. I wanted my eyes adjusted to the dark. From the crack under the door, I could see the faint, greenish glow of the hallway's emergency exit sign. At 6:30, I started hearing the sounds again. The rattle of a cheap percolator, the clink of a spoon against ceramic dot, and the faint hiss of steam rising from the kitchen just beyond my wall. But this time I didn't freeze. I pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the smells, they were stronger than ever. Not drifting, pouring in dot, and then, like every morning before he died, I heard the slow shuffle of footsteps approaching my door. And at 6:47, a May-sharp, there it was. 2 knocks, I held my breath. No footsteps walking away, no door closing, just silence. A heavy kind of silence that seemed to hum inside my ears. I opened the door 5 minutes later. The hallway was empty, but the air was warm, humid, like someone had been standing there, just inches from the wood. And something else caught my eye. On the floor just outside my door sat a newspaper. Today's paper. My first instinct was to slam the door shut. Instead, I reached out and picked it up. The pages were slightly damp, coffee-stained. I called building management. They swore that no one had access to apartment 305. No one had entered or exited in weeks. They offered to come check the place, but I told them no. Not yet. I wanted one more night. One more 6:47. Tonight, I'm setting up a camera, not facing the hallway, inside, pointing at my own door. because I don't think it's about what's out there. I think it's about what's coming through. I didn't sleep. I barely blinked. The camera sat on a tripod facing my front door, the little red light glowing like a warning. Every time the building creaked, I flinched. Every time the pipes hissed, I thought of the steam from his coffee. At exactly 6:30 a.m., the sounds returned. The familiar grind of beans, the gurgle of boiling water, the soft clinking, spoon to mug, and then footsteps, heavy, slow, deliberate. I held my breath. 2 knocks, sharp, final, right on time. I didn't open the door this time. I waited until the noises stopped, until everything was silent again. Then I stood up, walked to the camera, and hit stop. I played the footage back immediately. At first, it showed nothing unusual, just me sitting there, breathing shallow, wide-eyed. Then, at 6:47, the timestamp blinked, and the door in the frame shifted, not opened, not unlocked. It just bent inward, as if pushed by air pressure or something heavier. The surface flexed in a way wood shouldn't, and something for a single frame pressed against it from the other side. Not a hand, not a face, just a long, thin impression. Like fingers without flesh, I paused the video, rewound, watched again. The knock wasn't from the hallway. It came from inside the door. I packed a bag before the sun rose. I left the camera behind, still recording. I don't care what it captures anymore. I haven't gone back to that apartment. But this morning at 6:47, my phone buzzed with a notification from the camera's cloud storage. Just a single still frame. A new newspaper lying in front of the door. Steam curling in from beneath it. And beneath that, bare footprints leading out. I moved into the apartment in early March. Not for long, just until the contractors finished gutting my place across town. 3 months, max. It was a bland, rectangular unit on the 5th floor of a nearly empty building. No photos online had shown the peeling paint in the hallway, the flickering ceiling lights, or the faint stench of cigarettes baked into the plaster. But I didn't care. I just needed a bed, a bathroom, and a door that locked. There were only 2 apartments on my floor, mine and the one directly across the narrow corridor. The door across was always shut tight. No sounds, no movement, no names on the mailboxes downstairs. I assumed the place was empty. On the 3rd day, that changed. I stepped out to grab groceries and nearly collided with the man from across the hall. He didn't say a word, just stood there in the threshold of his door like he'd been waiting for me. Mid to late 40s, thinning hair combed flat, pale skin that looked almost gray under the hallway light. He wore a dark wool sweater and heavy corduroy pants, despite the rising spring heat. He didn't smile, just stared. I said a quick hello and brushed past him. After that, I started noticing things, small things. The elevator always stopped on my floor when I returned, even when I was sure no one else had called it. The garbage chute next to my door would creak open, gently in the middle of the night. The smell of cigarette smoke would drift in through the vents, but only when I turned out the lights. I chalked it up to building quirks. It was old, noisy, maybe he smoked. Maybe I was just oversensitive from the stress of moving. But there was a pattern forming. Whenever I made a sound, dropped something, moved a chair, flushed a toilet, I'd hear something almost immediately afterward. Not echoes, not the natural thumps of apartment life. responses. Once, while brushing my teeth, I heard the exact same rhythm of spitting and rinsing coming from the other side of the bathroom wall. A few seconds behind me. Like a delay, it got under my skin. I started testing it. I knocked on the kitchen wall. Once, then twice. Nothing. The next night I tried again. 2 quick knocks while standing in the hallway. I got 2 knocks back, faint, measured, perfectly mirrored. That night I barely slept. Every creak felt like it came from just inches away. I kept my phone in hand, screen dimmed, staring at the wall across from my bed like it might blink. My thoughts spiraled. Vents, wiring, old drywall. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe sound just carried weirdly through the walls here. But the feelings didn't stop. I couldn't relax in my own space. I felt observed. It came to a head one evening when I returned from work and found the peephole on my door taped over from the outside. I didn't hear anyone in the hallway, but when I ripped the tape off, I noticed his door was ajar, just an inch, just enough to see the edge of a shoe, unmoving. I didn't open my door again that night. Later in bed, I heard something new, not knocks, not footsteps, a low sound right against the wall by my headboard. Breathing. Steady, slow, close. Like someone was resting their face right up against the plaster, separated from me by just a few inches of drywall. I started sleeping with headphones in, not because it helped, but because it gave me a sense of separation, a thin barrier between me and the man across the hall. But I still woke up every night around 3 a.m., sweating, heart pounding, certain that I wasn't alone. Every time I opened the door, his was closed. But I knew he was there. At some point, the noises began coming from inside the apartment itself. I'd leave a drawer closed, come back to find it slightly open. My phone would buzz with missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, all logged while I slept. Once, I found the bathroom cabinet open, and a Q-tip laid perfectly parallel to the sink. I hadn't used any. Something was wrong with the walls. There was a cold spot behind my bedroom dresser. I hadn't noticed it before. The wall there felt different, hollow somehow. I knocked gently, not to provoke, but to test. The sound wasn't sharp. It was soft, like the space inside wasn't filled with insulation or brick, but open. I pressed my ear to it. Nothing at first, then a shift, a faint shuffling, fabric on drywall, followed by silence. I tried not to panic. Googled the building's blueprints, but found nothing helpful. I asked the maintenance guy in the lobby if he knew anything about the unit next door. He looked at me too long before answering. "Been vacant for a while," he said. "Don't think it's on the lease rotation anymore." I asked who lived there now. He just shrugged and said, "Nobody," before walking away. That night, I pulled the dresser away from the wall. Behind it, the paint was cracked. More than cracked, warped, like something had been pressing against it from the other side. I tapped again, then ran my hand over the surface. My fingers caught on a small hole in the wall, a perfect thumb-sized gap near the corner. Too small to be accidental, too smooth to be natural. I bent down to look inside. Pitch black, but after a few seconds, my eyes adjusted just enough to see that the hole wasn't a dead end. It opened into a narrow cavity, maybe a foot wide, a crawl space between the walls. I could just make out a corner of something shiny deep in the darkness. Then movement, a glint of reflection, and an eyeball. Someone was looking back at me. I screamed and fell backward, knocking over the lamp. When I scrambled up and shone my phone light into the hole, it was empty again. Just the dead quiet and the slow realization that the man wasn't watching me from the hallway anymore. He was inside the walls. I didn't sleep after I saw the eye. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't leave the apartment. I just sat there in the corner of the living room with a kitchen knife in one hand and my phone in the other, checking the hole in the wall every few minutes like it might grow teeth. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a hallucination. Sleep deprivation, stress, old building noises, anything but what I knew deep down to be true. But then I found the hatch. It was behind a false panel in the bedroom closet, barely visible unless you knew to look. A piece of plywood, thin and splintered at the edges, with tiny nails that came out with just a little pressure. When I pulled it back, there was a narrow opening behind it, revealing a vertical shaft, a space between units, maybe once used for old wiring or ventilation. It smelled like rust, mold, and something else, something biological. I shone my flashlight into the darkness. The beam disappeared into a slanted corridor of cobwebs and old dust. And then stairs. Rotten, narrow stairs leading down into the space below the floor. I should have called someone. I should have run. But instead, I climbed down. The crawlspace led to a small room, barely 6 feet by 6. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, dirt on the floor, and in the corner, a nest, a pile of blankets, yellowed newspapers, torn up insulation, and bones. Small ones. Rodents, probably. Or maybe not. Next to the nest was a box, metal, rusted. Inside were dozens of Polaroids. Most were black, overexposed, or too smudged to make out, but a few were clear. They were photos of me, sleeping, brushing my teeth, eating cereal, sitting at my desk. They were all taken from behind walls, through vents, cracks, and holes, from inside the apartment. He had been there the entire time, living between units, watching. I grabbed a handful of the photos and bolted back up. When I got to my apartment, his door across the hall was wide